Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I grew up in a quiet little town in the Midwest, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and knew the names of every dog on the street. Crime wasn't something we really thought about. If someone got caught shoplifting a candy bar from the gas station, it was all anyone talked about for a week. It wasn't exciting, but it felt safe. At least, that's what we all believed. My name's Brandon, and I was 9 years old when I learned that safety can be an illusion. My family lived in a modest row of townhouses at the edge of our neighborhood. They were plain but comfortable. Two-story buildings with beige siding, postage stamp front yards, and a long, cracked parking lot we shared with the other residents. Each unit had those tall, rectangular front windows, the kind that let you see everything outside, and unfortunately, let anyone outside see everything in. At 9, my world was simple. I rode bikes with the neighbor kids, played hide and seek until the streetlights came on, and spent a lot of time curled up in front of the TV. I was a nervous kid, though, jumped at loud noises, double-checked my closet before bed. I loved scary movies but regretted watching them as soon as the credits rolled. I hated being outside alone after dark, especially when the wind picked up and the streetlights flickered, casting long, twitching that made your breath puff out in little clouds, and the trees, now stripped bare, creaked and scraped their branches together in the wind like bony fingers tapping on a window. That night my mom had gone out for dinner with some friends. She kissed the top of my head, told me not to stay up too late, and left Amber, my 16-year-old sister, in charge. Amber and I didn't exactly get along. She thought I was annoying. I thought she was mean. She spent most of her time locked in her room gossiping with her friends on the phone, and I spent mine wrapped in a blanket burrito on the living room couch, watching reruns of old cartoons. The only light in the house came from the TV screen, casting a flickering glow over the walls and ceiling. The rest of the room was swallowed in shadows, broken only by the orange glow of a street lamp outside the front window. I remember looking out absently during a commercial break. The parking lot was still, just a few cars parked under the light, nothing unusual. But then I saw it, a shape. At first I thought it was my imagination, maybe a trick of the light or something reflecting off the glass. But no. There was someone standing there, a figure, barely visible in the dim orange haze just beyond one of the parked cars. My breath hitched. Slowly I turned my head for a better look, heart thudding in my chest. It was an old man. He stood unnaturally still, almost statue-like. His skin looked pale, almost gray in the light, and he had this eerie expression, his mouth slightly open, as if caught mid-word, and his eyes, God, his eyes were small and dark and locked directly onto mine. He wasn't blinking. He wasn't moving. He was just watching me. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. My entire body tensed like it was bracing for something I couldn't name. The longer I looked, the more my skin prickled, like 1,000 tiny spiders crawling just under the surface. Then, just as silently as he had appeared, the old man turned and walked slowly out of view, disappearing into the shadows near the edge of the lot. I finally exhaled, shaky and shallow, and bolted off the couch. My blanket fell to the floor as I ran straight to Amber's room, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. "Amber," I cried, bursting through the door. "There's a man outside." She looked up from her phone with the blank expression only a teenage girl could perfect. "What?" "There's a guy, an old man. He was just standing there, by the cars. He was staring at me." Amber rolled her eyes and sighed, clearly annoyed. "It's probably just someone passing by. God, Brandon, stop being such a baby." I stood there, fists clenched at my sides, my voice caught in my throat. I wanted to scream at her to make her take me seriously, but I knew I'd get nowhere. She'd just accused me of watching too many scary movies again. So I turned and walked back to the living room, every step heavier than the last. I wrapped the blanket back around me like armor and sat down, trying to steady my breathing. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was just someone passing through. Maybe I imagined how pale he looked, how still he was, how his eyes didn't blink. 10 minutes passed, and then it got worse. The phone rang, sharp and sudden in the quiet. I jumped, heart still racing from earlier. Amber didn't even glance up from her phone as she muttered, "It's Mom." I picked up. "Hello?" "Brandon, sweetheart," Mom said, her voice warm but distracted, the clinking of silverware and background chatter bleeding through the line. "Can you take the trash out for me before you go to bed?" I hesitated, gripping the receiver a little tighter. I almost told her, about the man, the staring, the way it froze me inside. But something held me back. Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe it was how casually Amber had brushed it off earlier. I didn't want to sound like a baby again. "Okay," I said quietly. The trash bins were located at the far end of the parking lot, right near the edge of the woods where the tree line began. In daylight, it wasn't far. At night, it felt like a mile. I pulled on my jacket, zipped it up to my chin, and stepped outside. The cold hit instantly, sharp and dry, carrying the scent of distant smoke and dead leaves. The wind had picked up, whistling through the trees and rattling their bare branches like bones tapping against one another. The street lamp above flickered again, buzzing faintly. Shadows danced along the cracked pavement. I kept my eyes down and walked fast, the bag of trash swinging at my side. My sneakers tapped softly against the concrete, each step too loud in the stillness. My breath steamed out in little clouds. I tossed the trash into the bin and turned, ready to sprint back. And there he was again, less than 15 feet away. He was crouching low, peeking out from between two parked cars. Only his forehead and eyes were visible above the hood of an old blue sedan, but it was enough. I knew it was him, that same ashen skin, those dark, unblinking eyes. My body seized. I couldn't move. And then he spoke. "Hey, come here." The words were barely audible, carried on the wind like dry leaves. His voice was hoarse, rasping, not quite human. My brain screamed at me to run, to scream, to do anything, but I stood frozen, heart hammering in my ears. Then he slowly sank back behind the car, disappearing. That broke the spell. I ran. As I sprinted past the parked cars, I turned my head for just a second and saw something I'll never forget. They were there with him. Two women. Elderly, maybe in their 70s, but twisted somehow. They were crouched low like animals, completely naked, their skin hanging off their bones like wet paper. Both of them grinned at me, wide, grotesque smiles that seemed too big for their faces. Their eyes gleamed black in the dim light, unblinking. And the man, he was wearing a costume, a ragged homemade thing with long ears flopping over to one side, like a rabbit suit that had been left to rot in a basement. It looked stitched together, wrong in every way. They were waiting. I heard movement, bare feet slapping against the pavement, uneven and fast. Then came a high-pitched giggle, almost childlike, followed by a sharp whisper, close and cruel. "Come back." I didn't look. I didn't stop. I hit the front door hard, flung it open, slammed it shut behind me, and locked every bolt I could find. My fingers were shaking too much to work properly. I backed away from the door, gasping for air, tears blurring my vision. "Amber!" I screamed, my voice breaking. "Amber!" She finally came out of her room, face annoyed. "What the hell is wrong with—" Then she saw my face. Her expression changed immediately. "Brandon, what happened?" I stammered through it all, every word tumbling out between gasps and sobs. Her arms folded, her brow furrowed in disbelief. I could see her doubt, right up until— tap. A slow, deliberate knock on the living room window. Not loud, just steady, intentional. Amber turned toward the sound, her face drained of color. We stood frozen. Tap. We called the police. They showed up within minutes. Flashlights swept the parking lot. beams dancing across pavement and trees. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, just silence and wind. But near the trash bins, caught on a bare branch of one of the bushes, they found something. A scrap of fabric. Torn, pale pink, dirty, stained with something dark and crusted that might have been blood. They took it with gloved hands and spoke in quiet, clipped voices. None of them smiled. I never imagined my senior year would end the way it did. Looking back, I should have seen the signs, little cracks in the surface that hinted at something darker. I should have known Ryan was more than just a rebellious kid desperate to stand out. But when you're 17, you don't think that way. You think the people you laugh with, get high with, skip class with, you think they're just like you. Stupid, restless, harmless. I grew up in one of those towns where nothing ever really happens. The kind of place where the highlight of the year is the county fair, and the biggest scandal is someone crying over a breakup in the cafeteria. Everyone knew everyone, and if you did something dumb, your parents would know about it before you even walked through the front door. That's probably part of the reason I ended up running with the wrong crowd. Boredom is a powerful thing when you're a teenager. Ryan was different. He didn't just wear black because it was a trend. He lived it. He talked about rituals, symbols, and demons, like he genuinely believed in that stuff. At first, I thought it was an act, some elaborate performance to get under the skin of his rich, church-going parents who barely acknowledged his existence. But he never broke character. Not once. Then there was Derek. He wasn't like Ryan. Not at first. Derek was quiet. His mom drank too much, his dad had vanished years ago, and he spent more time sleeping on Ryan's couch than in his own bed. There was this simmering anger in him. Not loud or dramatic, just this low, tense hum beneath the surface that made you nervous without knowing why. Somehow the three of us clicked. We became inseparable. We did the usual dumb stuff bored teens do in a dead-end town. Smoked weed in cornfields. Broke into abandoned houses, tagged buildings with spray paint, complained about how much we hated our lives. It all felt harmless back then. Just noise. Then came that night. It was the week before Halloween. Ryan told us he was throwing a party. "My parents are out of town," he said, grinning like a kid with a secret. "It's gonna be huge." Ryan's house was in one of those cookie-cutter developments on the edge of town. Two-story homes with fake shutters, manicured lawns, and driveways full of spotless SUVs. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happens. At least that's what people like to think. The party was already packed when we got there. Kids from school, sketchy older guys, girls I'd never seen before. The house smelled like weed and booze. Music shook the floorboards. There were pills being passed around like candy. Everyone was either laughing too loud or swaying too hard, but Ryan kept teasing that there was more. "A surprise," he said, his eyes glittering. "Something you'll never forget." I thought it was going to be a prank. Maybe a fake seance or one of those stupid horror movie reenactments to scare the girls. I laughed it off, high and half drunk, ready to play along. At around 11, Ryan called a bunch of us down to the basement. "Come on," he shouted over the noise. "It's time." His basement was finished. Soft carpet, a pool table, old couches, even a projector set up for gaming. It should have been just another night of zoning out and watching dumb movies. But as soon as I stepped into the room, I felt it. That shift. The air got heavy, like all the oxygen had been sucked out. Everyone was sitting in a loose circle, their faces lit dimly by a single lamp. But all eyes kept darting to the far corner of the room, to a closed door. Ryan and Derek stood beside it, grinning. Not the goofy kind of grin you flash when you're about to tell a joke. This was something else, excited, eager. Without a word, Ryan yanked the door open. She was tied to a chair, gagged, filthy, her arms bound with what looked like an extension cord. My stomach dropped. It was Lila. Crazy Lila, people called her. The homeless woman who wandered downtown muttering to herself, pushing a cart full of cans. Everyone in town knew her, even if they pretended not to. And now she was in Ryan's basement. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice cracking. Ryan turned to me, eyes shining. "Tonight," he said calmly, "we play a game." Derek stepped forward holding a handful of darts. "A human dartboard," he said, grinning. Laughter rippled through the room, not loud but enough to chill me. I waited for the punchline, for them to untie her, laugh about how freaked out we were. Maybe it was some elaborate stunt, fake blood, makeup, whatever. But then Ryan stepped up. He threw the first dart. It stuck in her arm. She let out a muffled scream, twisting in the chair. Everyone just watched. Then Derek threw one. It landed just below her collarbone. Someone cheered. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My legs felt rooted to the spot. A few others joined in. Not everyone. Some were as frozen as I was, their faces pale, lips trembling. But enough. Enough of them moved. And that's when it hit me. How deep we were in. How far gone Ryan was. And how none of us were getting out of this night unchanged. I stood there staring at Lila in the chalk circle, and everything inside me screamed that this had gone too far. Way too far. My throat was dry, my heart pounding like it was trying to break out of my chest. "This is insane," I finally said, my voice cracking. "Let her go." Ryan turned toward me slowly. The grin he'd been wearing all night was gone. His eyes were cold now, flat and unreadable. "You don't get it," he said, voice low and deliberate. "This is bigger than a game." Derek stepped forward, unzipping a black duffel bag and pulling out something long, gleaming under the low light. A knife. Not some kitchen blade, something ritualistic, almost ceremonial, its edge curved and stained. "We offer her to the king," Derek whispered, almost reverently. I felt my stomach lurch. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a prank. They were serious. They were going to kill her. I turned, instinct kicking in. I had to get out. I had to find help. But before I could move, Ryan's older brother, who'd been quietly filming everything from the start, stepped into the doorway, blocking the exit. "You leave," Ryan said, his voice sharp now, all traces of charm gone. "And this tape goes to the cops. Or your parents. Blackmail. If we ran, we'd all be blamed. We'd all be part of it." I looked around the room. Some kids were pale, trembling. A few girls had tears in their eyes, covering their mouths in horror. It wasn't fun anymore, if it ever was. That's when I felt a hand on my arm, a whisper in my ear. "I'm calling the cops," said Emma. She was a junior, someone I barely knew from chem class. Her voice was shaking. She'd hidden her phone in her purse, already dialing. I nodded quickly and shifted to block her from view as she pressed the call button. Across the room, Ryan dragged Lila into the center, placing her carefully inside the chalk circle. The symbols around it were crude, like something copied from a half-read book or internet forum. But his movements were disturbingly focused, almost reverent. Ryan raised the knife high. His face was wild, eyes wide, mouth twitching into a twisted smile. Not excitement, something deeper, darker, unhinged. Lila writhed against the ropes, her gagged screams barely audible over the low electric hum of the basement light. She looked around, frantic, eyes pleading for someone to stop this. Everyone had gone quiet. The room was heavy with something suffocating, guilt, fear, disbelief. Whatever illusion of just a game that had existed was gone. And then, sirens. Red and blue lights splashed across the basement windows. Tires screeched outside. Shit, Derek hissed, eyes darting to the door. Ryan's expression twisted into something furious. He whirled toward us. Who the hell? I didn't wait. I ran straight at him. I slammed my shoulder into his ribs hard. He staggered back with a grunt, the knife clattering to the floor. Derek lunged, but I was already moving. I dove, grabbed the blade, and without thinking started sawing at Lila's ropes. The basement exploded into chaos. Some kids bolted for the stairs, shoving each other in a panic. Others stood frozen, mouths open in silent horror. Lila, now free, yanked the gag from her mouth and let out a scream. Raw, piercing, human. Then the door burst open. Cops poured in, guns drawn. Hands! Hands up, now! Ryan was still reaching for the knife when they tackled him, pinning him to the floor with brutal efficiency. Derek made a break for the back door but only got a few feet before they slammed him to the ground, twisting his wrists behind his back. The rest of us, we just stood there. Stunned. Guilty. Waiting. The aftermath blurred together. Sirens, flashing lights, the smell of sweat and fear. We were questioned for hours. Who knew what? Who helped? Who stood by and let it happen? Most of us weren't charged. The police called us witnesses when bystanders. We hadn't participated, but it didn't feel like enough. Not to me. Ryan and Derek? Different story. Turns out Ryan's house had more than just the video from that night. There were other tapes, photos, chilling evidence of things that had happened before. Things none of us had known about. Things I don't even want to remember. Ryan was sentenced to life in prison. No parole. Derek got 25 years. Ryan's brother, the one filming, got 15. I left town not long after, changed states, changed my number, cut ties with anyone who reminded me of that night. But even now, years later, I still see their faces, in nightmares, in mirrors. And sometimes, when the world is too quiet, I wonder, how many times had Ryan done this before? How many people just like him are out there right now, planning their next party, their next game, their next victim? I try not to think about it, but I always do because I was almost one of them. Small town. Senior year of college when it happened. Long before smartphones, back when payphones still dotted street corners like relics of another era. The university I attended sat tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains, surrounded by thick woods and winding roads that felt like they led nowhere. The town itself seemed forgotten by time. One narrow main street, a few aging storefronts, and a couple of dive bars where students and locals mingled in uneasy silence. It didn't take long to figure out the locals didn't like us. They tolerated the university because it brought in money, rent, groceries, beers bought in bulk on game days. But we were invaders to them, outsiders, temporary. They knew we'd pack up after 4 years and vanish while they would still be there, mending roofs, stocking shelves, trying to hold on to whatever life they had left in that place. Some ignored us. Others made a show of barely concealing their contempt. But then there were people like Calvin Briggs. I'd heard about Calvin before I ever saw him. His name carried a quiet kind of weight, like a warning passed between whispered conversations. He was a regular at the Rusty Stag, the only real bar in town where college kids and townies coexisted, if you could call it that. The stories about him never changed. He was mean, unpredictable, and he hated students with a passion that didn't make sense until you saw him. He had a habit of choosing targets, usually guys who looked like they didn't belong, too clean-cut, too confident, too different. The weekend before, he'd sat himself down at a group's table uninvited. He didn't say a word for a long time, just sat there, watching, sipping whiskey. Then, out of nowhere, he reached under the table and grabbed one of the guy's thighs. When the student shoved him away, Calvin exploded, punched the kid so hard he flew backward, then beat him unconscious. His friends tried to help, but Calvin laid them out too. The worst part? Nobody stopped him. Not the bar owner, not the other patrons, not even the local cops. The guy ended up in the hospital. And Calvin, he walked out like nothing had happened. So when Saturday rolled around again, I'd had enough. "Let's teach this bastard a lesson," I told my friends, my voice low but steady. It wasn't bluster. I meant it. My dad had taught me early to never play the victim, to protect the people who stood by you. I wasn't naturally aggressive, wasn't looking for a fight, but I knew how to hold my ground. I'd hustled pool and poker in smoky back rooms to help pay for tuition. I'd learned how to read people, how they breathed before they moved, how their eyes gave them away, and I knew from the stories that Calvin liked to hit his victims in the gut. So I got ready. That night, before we left the dorm, I wrapped old magazines around my torso, layering them under my sweatshirt and taping them down with thick electrical tape. It felt ridiculous, but it might make the difference. I slipped an empty glass Coke bottle into the inside pocket of my heavy jacket. Not a weapon, not yet, but something solid, something I could use if I had to. By 11:30, we were sitting at a corner table in the Rusty Stag. We left one chair open. Deliberately. We laughed, drank, leaned into each other like nothing was out of the ordinary. But we were waiting, and when one of my friends leaned over and whispered, "He's here," I felt every muscle in my body coil. We didn't look at him, didn't flinch. We just waited. And right on cue, like some story playing out on repeat, he came to us. Calvin dropped into the empty seat beside me. He didn't say a word, just sat there, his presence pressing against us like a heavy fog. The conversations around us dipped, then died out altogether. You could feel the bar holding its breath. I turned my head slowly, met his eyes, offered a tight, polite smile. "Hey," I said. That's when he did it. His hand clamped down on my thigh. Hard. His fingers dug into my leg with a grip like iron, deliberate, possessive, testing me. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared. His breath hit me like a wave, whiskey, sweat, and something sour underneath like rotting meat. "Well," I said, voice calm, almost amused, "you're certainly not shy." My friends chuckled, but the sound was brittle, nervous. The room went silent. Even the jukebox seemed to hesitate. And I could feel it. Something shifting, right then. Something old and dangerous rising in the air. I had a wad of chewing tobacco tucked in my cheek, bitter and gritty. Without thinking, I leaned in and spat, right in his eye. His reaction was immediate. He recoiled, both eyes clamping shut in surprise, and that half-second of blindness was all I needed. I drew back my fist and drove it straight into his throat. The impact was ugly. His body jolted backward, the chair beneath him skidding and toppling. He hit the floor hard, coughing violently, wheezing, his hands clawing at the air like he could grab hold of breath itself. "Take it outside," someone barked, probably the owner, but their voice was distant, muffled by the blood pounding in my ears. Calvin was already getting up. He looked different now. No swagger, no sick amusement in his expression. Just pure fury. We shoved through the back door, spilling into the frigid alley behind the bar. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I barely felt it. Dim streetlights stretched our shadows long and twisted against the brick walls. Calvin turned to face me, steam rising off his body in the cold. His eyes burned with rage, his lip curled in a snarl. "You little college fuck," he growled, His voice was raw and cracked from the throat punch, but it carried a venom that went deeper than pain. He came at me fast. I barely blocked the swing. The force of it sent a jolt down my arm, numbing my fingers. I staggered, reached into my jacket and gripped the Coke bottle. The cold glass felt solid, real, in a moment that was anything but. I swung hard. The bottle cracked against his skull with a sickening sound. Dull, final. He reeled back, blood streaming from his forehead. But he didn't fall. He looked at me through that curtain of blood and smiled. A terrible, broken smile. That's when it hit me. This man had been hit before, more than once. And he didn't care. He lunged again. I threw my leg out, aiming low, kicking sideways into his knee. It bent the wrong way. Calvin stumbled, slammed into the wall with a grunt. But then he pushed off, still coming like something possessed. Behind me, my friends were yelling, panicked, desperate, but their voices blurred together, meaningless noise in the chaos. And then, bang, a single gunshot, loud, sharp. The sound shattered the night and everything stopped. My body froze. Calvin stopped too. A man stepped into the alley from the shadows. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't a local. I'd never seen him before in my life. But he held a gun in his hand casually, like he'd been holding it all his life. And he was smiling. "I'd say that's enough," he said, his voice calm, measured, like he'd just walked into a poker game and we were out of chips. Calvin turned toward him slowly, still breathing heavy, blood down his face. And then something happened. I'll never forget. His rage just vanished. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was worse than fear. Recognition. Like he knew this man. Knew exactly what he was capable of. He opened the door before I even knocked, like he'd been waiting. His eyes were red. He looked like hell. "You hear it too, don't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded. My mouth felt too dry to speak. Nate ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "What the hell is it?" I didn't have an answer, but I could see the fear in his face, the kind that doesn't come from a bad dream, the kind that sticks. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's getting worse." I followed him inside, and he told me what happened 2 nights ago. He'd woken up at 3 a.m., no noise, no dream, just wide awake. His bedroom door was open. The thing is, Nate always locks his door. It's a habit, a rule. He was sure he had that night too, so he flipped on the light, and that's when he saw it. "Just for a second," he whispered, voice shaking. "It was standing in the corner." "What did it look like?" I asked. He stared past me for a second before speaking. Tall, too tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling, and its eyes, they didn't reflect the light. They absorbed it, like they were pulling it in. A cold sweat formed on my skin. I tried to offer a lifeline. "You sure you weren't dreaming?" I wish I was. We were both losing it. Or maybe we weren't. That night, we decided to find out the truth. We set up a camera in my room, pointing straight at the window. If something was really out there, we'd catch it. We shouldn't have done that. The next morning, I sat down to check the footage. My heart was racing before I even pressed play. The first few hours were uneventful. Just me tossing, turning, restless under the covers. But then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., something changed. A shadow moved outside the window. I paused the video, rewound, played it again, frame by frame. At first I thought it was just an animal, but then it stood up and kept standing. Too tall, way too tall. It towered over the window, its proportions all wrong, like someone had stretched it out in places a human body shouldn't be stretched. Then came the tapping. Slow, deliberate, like it was making sure I could hear every single touch of its fingers on the glass. And then it leaned in. For the briefest moment I saw its face. Not eyes. Sockets. Hollow, black, empty voids. A mouth that didn't open so much as split. No expression. No humanity. I slammed the laptop shut, hands trembling. Nate called a minute later. "It knows we're watching," he whispered. "It knows, Evan." That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind made my muscles tense. I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was in my head, that I hadn't seen what I knew I saw. The tapping returned, then stopped. And at 3:12 a.m., right on the dot, my bedroom door creaked open. I froze. Not a sound. Not a breath. I turned over slowly, every movement a battle. And there it was, a shape, standing in the doorway. It was too tall, its head bent at an unnatural angle to fit beneath the frame. Its body looked wrong, disjointed, like its bones had been broken and reassembled by someone who didn't know how human anatomy worked. Its breathing was loud, strained, like air didn't come easy to it. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there, praying it wouldn't come closer. Then, without a sound, it was gone. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't even tell my dad. I just left. I haven't been back to that My little rental house sat on the outskirts of town, nestled between quiet, aging streets lined with tired fences and trees that cast long shadows at dusk. Nothing much ever happened out there. I worked at the only coffee shop in town, a cozy, dim-lit place with chipped mugs and the faint smell of burnt espresso soaked into the wood. My days followed a rhythm so familiar it bordered on numbness. Wake up, work, go home, repeat. The town itself was slow-moving, one of those places where people still waved from their porches, and the loudest gossip revolved around real estate listings or whose kid just made it into college. Crime was more a rumor than a reality, so when things started to feel off, I chalked it up to stress, or overthinking. There was this guy, Ethan. He came in almost every day, always ordering the same thing: black coffee, no sugar, no fuss. At first, he was just another regular, one of those background characters you hardly notice. We all knew him as the quiet guy who sat in the corner, reading a physical newspaper like it was still 1995. He rarely smiled. His clothes were neat but plain. He blended in, until he didn't. It began gradually. He started making small talk while I rang up his order. "How's your day going? Do you have any pets? Grew up around here?" The questions were normal, harmless even, and I answered without thinking much of it. I told him about Benny, my Labrador, and how my family lived a few hours away. At first, it was a welcome distraction from the monotony of my shifts. Having a conversation, even a shallow one, made the hours pass faster. But then I noticed something odd. Ethan only came in when I was working, never during my co-workers' shifts. If I opened, he'd be there before the sun was up. If I closed, he'd drift in just before we locked the doors. At first, I tried to reason it away. Maybe his schedule just lined up with mine. Coincidence, right? Then one morning, I had the opening shift. It was 4:30 a.m., still dark, fog hanging low like a curtain as I pulled into the parking lot, headlights catching on damp asphalt. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and glanced at the storefront. Ethan was there, standing outside the coffee shop. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't pacing. He just stood there, stock still, staring directly at the door. My stomach knotted. I hesitated, hand still on the keys. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. Maybe he couldn't sleep and wanted coffee, I told myself. That's all. Just a guy waiting for caffeine. I got out of my car and unlocked the door without making eye contact. Inside, the espresso machine hissed as I turned it on, its warmth creeping into the cold air. But I could feel it, his gaze, still fixed on me through the glass. A few minutes later, he walked in. He ordered his usual, sat in his usual spot. But this time, he didn't say a single word. No, good morning. No questions about Benny. Just silence. Something shifted that day. I couldn't explain it, but the air felt heavier, like it was pressing against my skin. He kept coming in like normal over the next couple of weeks, and eventually I convinced myself I'd imagined it, that maybe he just had an off day. Until something stranger happened. One evening, after a long closing shift, I pulled into my driveway and immediately noticed the lawn. It had been freshly mowed, perfectly. I stared at it through my windshield, confused. I lived alone, and I sure as hell hadn't mowed it. My neighbors were older, kind, but not the type to do surprise yard work for a stranger. I stepped out of the car slowly, keys still in hand, and walked up the path, eyes scanning the street for someone, anyone. No one was there. The next few days, the oddities piled up. The hedges out front, usually wild and overgrown, had been neatly trimmed. The weeds in my flower bed, ones I'd given up on pulling, were gone. My crooked mailbox, suddenly straight as a ruler. I wanted to believe it was a neighbor, some anonymous good Samaritan. But something in my gut twisted every time I tried to accept that explanation. From that point on, I changed how I spoke to Ethan. If he asked about Benny, I gave short, vague answers. If he brought up my work schedule or asked what days I'd be in, I played dumb, shrugged, acted like I didn't know. Because deep down, I did know. Someone had been watching. It started with a shift in tone. Ethan came in one evening, just like always. I was behind the counter, wiping it down, trying to wind down the day. The cafe lights were dimmer than usual, casting long reflections on the polished surface. But instead of the typical nod or small talk, he looked straight at me, his eyes cold, unblinking. "I think it's time you gave me something in return," he said quietly. "For all that yard work?" I froze, my hand still pressed around the damp cloth. I forced a short, nervous laugh, trying to keep things light. "I don't even know who's been doing that," I said, waving it off. "Probably one of the neighbors. They're nice like that." He didn't smile. He didn't say another word. He just took his coffee, turned, and walked out. That was the moment something inside me shifted. The certainty. The clarity. Ethan was dangerous. I had the closing shift that night. The cafe emptied out slowly, chairs flipped onto tables, machines powered down. But even as I locked the doors, I couldn't shake the weight in my chest, the dread that pulsed deeper with every passing minute. I kept glancing over my shoulder as I crossed the empty lot toward my car. The night air was damp and heavy, and the silence around me felt wrong, too complete, too staged. Then, I heard it. Footsteps. Fast. Coming up behind me. I spun around. Ethan. He was coming toward me, hand reaching into his jacket. My body froze, brain flashing one thought. He has a weapon. My breath caught, my vision tunneled, but instead of a knife or a gun, he pulled out something small, delicate, hanging from his fingers. It was Timothy, my bird. His tiny body dangled limply, wings stiff, neck bent at a grotesque angle. My sweet parrot, who chirped at the sound of my keys, who used to perch on my shoulder while I watched TV. He was dead. I don't remember screaming. I don't remember running to the car or even starting it. The next thing I knew, my hands were trembling violently as I jammed the key into the ignition, tires screeching as I tore out of the parking lot. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. But then, as I pulled into my driveway, my blood turned to ice. The front door was open. Wide. I sat there, frozen in my seat. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to call the police, to drive until the tank was empty. But Benny was inside. My dog. My best friend. I reached beneath the passenger seat and pulled out the tire iron I kept there, just in case. I opened the car door slowly, every step toward the house feeling like walking deeper into a nightmare. My breath sounded too loud, like it didn't belong to me, like it was echoing off invisible walls. "Benny," I whispered, stepping past the threshold. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Nothing looked out of place in the living room, no drawers open, no smashed furniture, no overturned cushions. But the stillness felt wrong. Then I heard it. Footsteps, soft, deliberate. I clenched the tire iron, my grip slick with sweat. "Who's there?" I croaked. My voice cracked like dry wood. "Hello?" No answer. I took a step forward, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Then I heard a growl. Low, threatening. "Benny." I turned toward the kitchen and saw him. My Labrador stood rigid, hackles raised, teeth bared. A deep, rumbling growl vibrated from his chest. His eyes were locked on the pantry door. It was ajar, and inside, crouched low in the shadows, was Ethan. I didn't think. I didn't give myself the chance. I ran forward and swung the tire iron with everything I had. It connected with something soft. His shoulder, maybe his skull, I don't know. There was a sickening crack and Ethan dropped, limp, crumpled. I grabbed Benny by the collar and bolted out the front door. The police arrived within minutes. Turns out someone had already reported Ethan that evening, said he was acting erratic near the coffee shop, pacing and muttering to himself. They found him unconscious in my kitchen, bleeding from the head, but alive. They didn't tell me much, just that he had already been under investigation, that there were concerns. that I wasn't the first person who'd reported something strange about him. After that night, I never saw him again. I don't know if he was arrested or committed, or if he simply vanished. All I know is that he was gone. window, my legs shaky, breath shallow. I pushed the curtain aside just enough to see. There was someone in the yard. A man. He stood near the side of the house, a brick in his hand. His back was to me, but his posture was rigid, shoulders high, like he was bracing for something. I couldn't breathe. Then, as if sensing me, he turned. Our eyes locked. His face was gaunt, hollow-cheeked, his skin pale and tight over his bones. His eyes, wide, sunken, wild, didn't seem to see me as much as look through me. Milan. We stood frozen for a second. Then, without a word, he dropped the brick. It hit the ground with a dull thud. He spun around and bolted, straight into the woods behind the house. I didn't even realize I'd moved. My body had reacted on instinct. I'd grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy flashlight, and rushed out the front door before I could even think. But by the time I reached the yard, he was already gone, swallowed by the trees. The police arrived about an hour later. By then, there was no sign of him. They searched the area, knocked on a few doors, took our statements. My mom was shaking, her hands clenched around a mug of cold coffee she wasn't drinking. Dad paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "He's been in and out of jail for years," one of the officers said under his breath, flipping through his notebook. "Drugs, petty theft, but breaking into a house?" He shook his head. "This is different. We'll find him." And they did. 2 days later, they found Milan hiding in an abandoned shed at the edge of town. He was filthy, half-starved, talking to himself. They arrested him on the spot, but that wasn't the part that haunted me. It was what they found after. Inside his house, buried under layers of filth, garbage bags, dirty clothes, moldy dishes, they found a pile of stolen items. Some of them were ours: my old sweater, a kitchen knife from our drawer, my sister Lila's hairbrush. But worse than that, worse than anything, was the stack of notebooks. Hundreds of pages filled with shaky handwriting, incoherent ramblings, strange symbols and messy drawings, names, dates, observations. And on one page, at the very bottom, repeated over and over in smudged ink, one sentence: "She's always alone at night." My stomach twisted into a knot, because Lila's bedroom window faced his house, and she always slept with her curtains open. We moved not long after, packed up and left the town behind like so many families do when they try to outrun something. Small, windswept town in northeastern North Dakota, where the winters were punishing and the people tougher. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, where Friday night meant football or bonfires, and where most kids either inherited the family farm or left without looking back. I chose the farm. Farming was in my blood. My father had worked that land, and his father before him. The soil ran through our veins, thick and unforgiving. At that time, I had two best friends, Brady and Connor. Brady was a couple years younger, but it never mattered. We'd grown up practically as brothers. He was always the one to say yes to a midnight drive or an impulsive hunting trip. Brady had a laugh that could shake the rust off a barn door and a reckless heart to match. Then there was Connor, calm, sharp, the type of guy who made you feel like your life could be more than broken fences and muddy boots. He worked at a John Deere dealership a few towns over, already talking about college, a mortgage, a steady job, a mapped-out life. The summer of 2022 felt like it might actually lead to something. I had a girlfriend, Sarah, who I thought I'd marry. Brady was lifeguarding at the town pool, flirting with every girl who walked in, while Connor was making real money fixing farm equipment and talking about transferring to a university in the fall. But life doesn't warn you when it decides to turn. By the time the leaves started to change, everything else had too. Sarah left me, said she needed more than dirt roads and diesel. Brady's summer fling packed for college in Minnesota, left a note and a kiss on his cheek. And Connor? He dropped out of school. No warning, just stopped going. We all unraveled in our own ways. Brady started picking up extra shifts at the grain elevator, trying to keep his mind too busy to think. I drowned my thoughts in grease-stained nights inside my family's workshop, elbows deep in busted tractor parts, radio static humming in the background. But Connor changed. It started small. One night we were in the shop, our usual hangout spot, tossing darts at a cracked board, drinking cheap beer, country music crackling from an old speaker. We were talking about nothing, really. Life, how it felt like we were stuck in some weird limbo. That's when Connor leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, eyes serious in a way that didn't match the beer in his hand. "We need to get right with God," he said. Brady let out a low chuckle, tossing a dart. "What, like go to church more?" "No, I mean really get right. Fully. No halfway bullshit." We all believed in God. In Cold Creek, you kinda had to. Whether you were in church every Sunday or not, faith was just baked in. But something about Connor's voice. It wasn't just belief. It was urgency. Desperation. That night stuck with me. It was like a shift, something invisible tilting in the room. A few weeks later, I was driving home from my last day of college classes, cold wind rattling the windows, thinking too hard about Sarah, when Connor called. "Come to church with me tonight," he said. "Let's pray about her, about everything." I hesitated. I wanted to say no, but instead, I found myself turning off the highway and heading toward the edge of town. The church was old, brick and sun-faded, tucked between a frozen field and a closed-down gas station. When we stepped inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Only a few fluorescent lights were on, buzzing faintly like mosquitoes. The carpet was thin and worn, doing little to muffle the sound of our boots. We sat in the back. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy, like something unseen was watching. Connor bowed his head. "Lord," he began, "make your plans clear for him. Help him let go of what he's lost, or bring it back if it's your will." His voice was steady, calm. But then, I heard it. A whisper, "She's coming back." I froze. It wasn't Connor's voice, it wasn't mine. It was something else, cold and breathless right by my ear. His fingers absently tracing the cracked spine of his Bible. His eyes had that far-off look again, the one that made you unsure if he was talking to you or to something else. Objects, people, places. I can just tell. It was getting harder to ignore the change in him. Prayer nights became more intense. He started speaking in tongues, his voice warping, his words a frantic, guttural string of syllables that didn't sound like any language I'd ever heard. He said it was the Holy Spirit moving through him. When Brady and I hesitated, unsure what to do, he stared at us with such disappointment it stung. "You don't have enough faith," he said one night, almost like a challenge. "That's why you can't feel it." Then he quit his job, no warning, just walked out of the John Deere dealership one day and never went back. Said God was calling him to a higher purpose. When they let him go, he didn't seem to care. He even smiled about it. That was when we knew things had turned a corner. It all came to a head during harvest season. I skipped one of his worship nights because I needed to help my dad finish the last run before the frost hit. He called me that night. I picked up, hands still stained with grease and soil. "Are you really choosing farming over God?" he asked, his tone calm but cold. Something inside me snapped. "If I don't work, I don't eat," I said. Then I hung up before he could respond. After that, Brady and I started pulling away. We still loved him. He was our friend. But something was wrong. And then came Mary. She was 24, fresh out of a bad breakup, soft-spoken and adrift. She started showing up to Connor's prayer meetings. Brady and I didn't think much of it at first. Cold Creek was full of people looking for peace. But something about the way they pulled her in was different. Mary changed fast. She stopped speaking to her parents, burned a box of childhood belongings, photos, letters, and even a hand-carved chest her grandfather had made for her. Connor told her it was tainted, said it had evil symbols hidden inside. She didn't question him. And then they renamed her. "Mary," Connor said to her during one of their late-night gatherings, "your real name was given to you by people who don't understand God's plan. This is who you were always meant to be." She believed him. Every word. Her parents were terrified. They tried reaching out, called the pastor Connor had recently aligned himself with, some outsider who'd moved into town and quickly started gathering a following. He agreed to a meeting at first, but when her parents said they wanted to bring Brady's dad, a respected local pastor, the invitation was revoked. No explanation, just, "We changed our minds." Months later, they finally confronted him, cornered him after a town meeting. All he said was, "You don't want to know." Then he turned his back and walked away. Mary moved in with the pastor's family. Her parents filed reports, pleaded with her to come home. Nothing worked. She was gone. Whatever Connor and that pastor had convinced her of, it had her entirely. But it wasn't over. The final break came when Connor turned on Brady. One night during a tense prayer session, Connor looked straight at him and said, delay. But the lot was quiet, the tree line swaying in the evening breeze. Empty. At 9:00 p.m., a park ranger, tall, wiry, with a tired face, approached us as we sat slumped on the hood of our car. "Park's closing, fellas," he said. "You'll need to head out." "We can't," Matt replied, his voice strained. "Our brother's missing. He never came back." The ranger frowned, immediately alert. "You report it?" "We talked to a cop," I said, "gave him the details. Nothing's turned up." He nodded and pulled out his radio, relaying the info to Ashwood PD again. Then he looked at us and said, "I'll hang around the lot for a while longer in case he shows up." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything in that moment. Matt and I checked into the only motel we could find nearby, $39.99 a night, wood-paneled rooms with humming refrigerators and sagging mattresses. We left messages on Ryan's voicemail, even though we knew he wouldn't get them. Still, we hoped. Hoped he'd somehow borrow someone's phone, call us, say it was all a big misunderstanding. He didn't. The next morning, the weight hit us full force. Ryan was gone. Not just late or lost. Gone. We went to the local police station and officially filed a missing person report. They took it seriously, but in a town like Ashwood with limited resources and an influx of out-of-towners, there was only so much they could do. For the next week, Matt and I tore the town apart. We printed flyers, hung posters on telephone poles and gas pumps, knocked on doors, asked questions. We drove every back road and checked every motel and campground, searching for any trace. Locals were sympathetic. Some remembered seeing Ryan, some didn't. No one had answers. Then COVID hit. The whole world seemed to stop, and with it our search. Police departments slowed, tips dried up, leads vanished. The country shut down, and with it, so did any real hope. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. We tried to move forward, but how do you keep living when your brother just disappears? After the 1-year mark, we almost gave up. Almost. Then, 2 years later, just a few days before Christmas, I got the call. It was the Ashwood police chief himself. I'll never forget his voice. Gravelly, cautious. "We found Ryan," he said. "You and your brother need to come down here, now." Matt and I didn't pack. We didn't think. We just drove, headlights cutting through snow flurries as we barreled down the highway to Ashwood. When we arrived, the chief sat us down. His hands were folded, but they trembled slightly. "A raid," he said. "We hit a trailer on the outskirts of town. Neighbors had been complaining about noise, suspicious activity, drugs,